Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Mike and today we are going to be doing my Anastasia eyeshadow palette family video. So this is just going to be an overview of the different palettes I have from Anastasia Beverly Hills / the Norvina sub-brand that they launched. As you can see, these are all of the ones that I have. Not as many as, for instance, my Urban Decay or my Juvia's Place palettes that I've already shown you. But I definitely like all of these, and this is like another one of those sections in my eyeshadow palette collection where I'm like, yeah, these are probably going to really stay together for as long as possible. So yeah, we are going to be talking about these real quickly. I will be doing some swatches, I think mainly of like favorite shades. I don't think I'll be swatching out every single shade in these palettes. There are a couple notable mentions perhaps that I should say before I get into all of these palettes. There are a few missing, so I never picked up the Amrezy because it has pressed glitters, and I never purchased the Alyssa Edwards because I felt it was very similar to Riviera, so I never got those because I didn't feel it added anything. However, I did finally pick up the Carli Bybel and also this larger Norvina palette in the Black Friday sales, because these were two that I have been eyeing up for a while. And even though this does have some pressed glitters, I feel that this does have a couple of other, like plenty of other shades that I can still play with. So I do have to say though that these are the ones I am still playing with. So I'm still sort of making my way through stuff I purchased in the Black Friday sales. I usually buy a lot at the time, and then it takes me months to just put everything on my face. So definitely within March, I still want to play with the Carli Bybel. It was my aim to play with this palette before filming this video, but unfortunately, Essence and Catrice already launched their new product, so I've been playing with those more to get those reviews up and out as soon as possible. So that's why I didn't get around to playing with this yet, but I think that before the month is over, I will have played with this on my eyes. So let me just start then with the Carli Bybel, because it's lying at the front. I'll just push this to the back a little bit so I can give this a more prominent space, you could say. And the reason why I initially didn't pick this up is because, again, some of these shades here also feel quite gritty and a bit like it could be a glitter, which I'm not a huge fan of pressed glitter. We'll get to that later. But yeah, the reason why I still like really wanted to try this palette is because it has a really good row of more cooler toned shades that has a pop of color as well. And then you get these warm tones here. I know that these warm tones are not going to be my favorite because it's like peaches and reds and yellow tone golds, and that's not necessarily my cup of tea. However, that top row is really where it's at, and especially these kind of shimmers. I think Anastasia does very well, like these like steely, grayish, lavendery kind of shades. There are a few of them in the Riviera as well, and those are usually my favorite shades. You get some mattes, you get plenty of shimmers in here too, so that's why I really wanted to own it. So I can't wait to put this on my eyes, especially because I do feel, because of the peach and the red and also this bronze shade, that it has a couple of really good shades for the springtime as well. So I'm stoked to work with this. I think that I'm just going to give you a swatch here for this shade, because that is what sold me on this palette. When I spotted this, like I first spotted this palette at Sephora in New York when I was on a trip. It had just launched, and I held off of buying it, but this shade really made me want to get the palette. So, some people have been commenting on these videos saying, why aren't you ranking things? I find rankings not always that helpful because I haven't used this yet, so where am I going to rank it if I haven't used it? I don't know where to put it. I do know one thing though for sure. One thing that I could rank and that I would probably rank last would be the Norvina Volume 3 Mini. I keep it in the box because I really like the cherry print, and because the box is giving me the information about the palette. And the reason why I usually don't keep boxes around is because I don't need the information. However, again, stunning little palette, really pretty color story, but this comes with at least, well, this feels like that same gritty texture that you also get in the Carli Bybel. This shade has as well. But this shade here is definitely a glitter, and nowhere on this packaging are these called pressed glitters. it's always just called eyeshadow, pro pigment, pressed pigment. It's never called a glitter, whereas with the ABH Norvina, like the 4 that I have here, there are 2 shades labeled as glitters, but there's also shades in here that have the same texture to this that they don't label as glitters. So I'm super confused because this shade here feels like that like that sugary kind of texture that you see a lot of pressed glitters have. So if this isn't a pressed glitter, then who am I? Like, I'm just super confused. However, it is a very pretty pressed glitter, I have to say, and I did just finish filming my makeup declutter videos, and I also decluttered my eyeshadow palette collection, and I definitely hung on to this because these shades here and this duochrome and also that shade I do really like. This definitely still inspires me, and I would like to go back to this. I think this will be fun for like an April or May shop my stash, because again, these colors just really speak to me for like the spring summer season with these reddy shades. And then of course you can bring in the blue to create some like purpley shades if you blend it in with the pink or with this red over here. So I think that this is a palette that I want to play around more with, just see what I can do with it, because so far I think I did 2 or 3 looks with this, but I haven't played with it enough, I feel. So this is definitely one I do want to go back to, but because I feel I was misled as a consumer when I bought this, because I really didn't know that this had any sort of glittery shades, I just felt very, very let down by this palette once it arrived, because if I had known in advance that this had these gritty texture products in it, I probably wouldn't have spent my money on it. I'll just put this over here. And then why did I decide to buy the volume 4 of these larger Norvina palettes? The volume 4 was the only color story that really appealed to me. The other ones were all a little bit dark and deep for me. These are the 2 that are labeled as pressed glitters by the brand. These 2, however, have that gritty texture that I feel in the mini, that you find in the mini as well. So I feel that those probably also need a glitter glue to stick down, because that's how I felt about that pressed glitter here. But I just really like how you get some really fun, bright pops of pink. This lavendery pink shade is really, really stunning. So that's a shade that I just know I want to put in the crease, because that's sort of where I would put it. And one thing I really like, I'm not sure if you can see that from just looking at it in the camera, but this and this are the 2 deepest shades you get. So for someone who's very fair girl friend, like who's a fair girl like myself, this palette is just, I think, going to be a really good one, because you get a lot of these like whimsical shades, you get some cooler tones, and I really like how this sort of, for me, like many of these like larger palettes, it kind of breaks into quads. So you have this super neutral quad, then you have a neutral quad with the pop of that. You can pull in this, you can pull in this. Like, I really feel like it just works like that for me. Not necessarily in rows, but really like quads. So I just, again, still need to play with this. And I really wanted to give the Norvina formula another shot. These are, of course, all pressed pigments. They are. But I just like how this is more cool toned leaning. It's got those fun, bright pops of something. I just wish that, for instance, this was more of like a royal purple rather than this like burgundy plum. And of course the 2 pressed glitters, I could do with that for sure. Yeah, if my voice sounds scratchy, I just spent 2 days talking to my camera to film those declutters. It took a long time, so that's why I'm a little raspy, because I was really like having a dry throat from all the talking. And now I'm filming this video today. Yeah, I think the core collection, you could say, that I have already tried, that's really where I feel the brand shines. Currently in my shop, my stash is the Soft Glam. I think this is a really pretty, very pretty soft, pinky toned spring palette. For me, Dusty Rose, Rose Pink, Sultry, and Mulberry. That's the shades I live for in this palette. And let me just swatch. Give these 3 a swatch real quickly. Like, these are just so pretty, and that's like my go-to look whenever I use this palette. I tend to go for those shades. So those are those 3 right there. They are just really nicely shimmery, foily, metallic-y kind of shades in like the shimmer options. I could do without these 2 like orange tone shades in the middle. Like, I put my thumb over it. Like, this is the palette for me. I kind of always skip over Orange Soda and Burnt Orange. I like everything else. I initially held off of buying this when it first launched because I thought it was going to be too dark. But then I started doing looks with it, and then I found out that the name Soft Glam is exactly what you get with this palette. This is really, really pretty, and I think it's a good all-rounder because it can cater to a lot of different people. I mean, if you don't go in with these like darker shades, you don't really get a super duper deep palette. So for me and my makeup taste, it ended up working a lot better than I had expected at first. I thought it was going to be way too dark, especially because very often when people on YouTube or Instagram rave about makeup, it's very much catered to medium to like deeper, not deep, but like deeper skin tones than my pale face. So that's why very often whenever eyeshadow palettes are hyped up like this one was when it was launched, I find myself not being able to work with it very well because it's just a little bit too dark and everything starts looking like a smoky eye. And with this, I feel I can still make it look very neutral and everyday if I stick to the right shades. But if I want to, I can really like take it up a notch and go from like daytime glam to nighttime glam. This palette is a great, great all-rounder, I feel. And it has to be one of my favorites from Anastasia, which I had not expected because it is also fairly warm toned. And that's something that we'll see in a lot of these palettes. Because let me talk about the cool toned palette from Anastasia. That would be the Sultry. Everybody says, ooh, the Sultry, and it came back for this Christmas season, like they put it back out there. You could get it as part of a set, and everybody's like, oh, it's such a great cool tone palette. If you are fair with a cool to neutral undertone, this is not going to be cool toned. And I'll get to why in a minute, but I think again the reason why a lot of people think this is very cool toned is because they have a warmer undertone, and if they use true cool tones, it's going to look very ashy. So I feel this is a great cooler toned palette for people with very warm skin tones, and then I think this will look a lot more cool toned to you than, for instance, a Modern Renaissance or a Soft Glam. However, if you have, like me, a fair to neutral a fair skin tone with a cool to neutral undertone, what's going to happen is that the shades that pull more cool toned on warmer skinned people, these shades are going to pull more warm toned. So something like Teak, that's going to be warm toned on me. Steampunk, warm toned. Ember, warm toned. Rose Quartz, warm toned. Bloom and Birch, warm toned. Cinder, warm toned. The only true cool tones I get in this palette are these three. Maybe, and the black. Blacks are usually cool toned as well. Yeah, so maybe Dystopian, because that's a cooler tone dark brown. But everything else has some warmth to it. So I do want to warn you, because I know this is a very sought after palette for some people, and that a lot of people are promoting this as being a cool tone palette. Is it cooler toned than anything else that Anastasia has to offer? And when this first launched, was it one of the first cooler toned palettes that really created a buzz in the makeup world? For sure, it was. It did. But I feel that compared to anything that I would deem more cool toned, something like a Too Faced white chocolate bar or an Urban Decay Naked 2, if you put this next to it, it's it's going to be laughable when you put those things together and actually compare them. I really do appreciate Cyborg in here, who doesn't love this shade. It's a silver, but it's not the kind of silver that's too stark. Like, it's bright, it's got a bit of brightness to it, but it has a certain depth to it. It's like a dirty silver, and that's what I really appreciate in that one. But this has some really excellent shimmers. I just mentioned Teak, Cinder, Steampunk, Ember, and Rose Quartz. Like, all 5 of those are stunning. I could probably do without these lighter shades simply because I get them in every palette. How many blacks do we really need? So I feel this color story could have been more cool toned and more unique for that reason. However, when it was launched, I get why everybody liked it so much. Bloom and Birch make for some really nice transition-y, kind of like pops of something different kind of shades. So I do appreciate it, but I'll stick to it. I feel that what this palette is missing for me is a good crease shade, because Twig is a little bit too dark for me, and Birch would be too warm toned to pull in some of the cooler tones. Slate is too dark as well, so I wish there was a matte in this palette that would be lighter than Twig or Birch, and that is cooler toned. And then this palette would have been a lot more successful for me. But yeah, I think that this is a stunning palette. It is very pretty, but not my favorite precisely for that reason, because if I go for cool tones, then I tend to go for other things. And I think that Anastasia is the kind of brand that does color stories that do not necessarily give you what you might expect. So where the Sultry is misleadingly being promoted as being cool toned, the Norvina, because of its lovely lavender velvet case, wasn't as purple as a lot of people had hoped. However, this is where my love train for these palettes got started. I bought the Mono Renaissance, I think a few months after it launched, and I had one of the smaller palettes that they did before the Mono Renaissance, the World Traveler, which I've decluttered since then. And it wasn't until this palette launched, I think a good 2 years later, that I started hunting down things like the Subculture and the Prism, because I fell in love with the formula so much. I just didn't get the hype with this one, but we'll talk about Mono Renaissance in a minute, because there's a reason why I didn't get the hype. But then this was released, and while I get everyone's disappointed that essentially you only get one purple in here, a lot of people don't like Soul because they feel it doesn't show up on them very well. On my fair, cool to neutral undertone, this shows up really well as a very stunning pop of something bright on the lower lash line, and it's more of like a periwinkle blue. I love periwinkles in the spring, so this is another one that I may have to pull into a Shop My Stash soon. And then Drama is a plum, but it's very, very deep. And then, of course, you get these two warm tones towards the end, of which I agree with many other people that they should have made these purples in one way, shape, or form. Because it would have been nice if you could have had like a darker purple in here, so you can create a full-on purple look a little more easily than putting a very deep shimmer in the crease, for instance, which I know a lot of people don't like. Rose Gold in here is really pretty. That's one of my favorites. I also really like Dazzling. I do really like Celestial, but my favorite shade in this palette is Volatile, which is a matte. And this is the kind of shade that I was like, oh, if this could have been in the Sultry, they would have struck gold. Because this is that cool toned crease shade that I was missing in the Sultry. So for me, this palette has a lot of really, really good options, and I just really like how soft and whimsical some of these shades are, especially something like Wild Child. You can just like top over something. You can do something very ethereal if you stick to, for instance, the pinks and the purples. You can go super cool toned if you stick to something like Volatile and Dreamer and perhaps a bit of Dazzling. You can go full on warm toned with Incense, these two, and a bit of Rose Gold and Summer. So I just feel it's a very versatile little palette for, well, the amount of shades you get. And even though it's not a purple palette, which I think a lot of people had wanted it to be, it is a very pretty one, and this is the one that really got my love for Anastasia started. So I just mentioned the Mono Renaissance, so let me just go on with this one. Mono Renaissance was of course the hype of 2016. I didn't get it straight away because I looked at this and I was like, what's everybody going on about? A lot of people have panned this, have used it up completely, like this was the palette to get. And for me and the kind of makeup that I like to do, this is just not really my vibe, save for what we have going on sort of like on that half of the palette, which very often if you see people's palettes, they have a lot of pan or use in these 6 shades. And that's what everybody loved. Burnt Orange is in the Soft Glam. Cypress Umber is also in the Soft Glam, and Tempera is also in the Soft Glam, in case you were wondering. So I do like those shades, save for Burnt Orange and also Golden Ochre. I never really understood. But yeah, this is a stunning little palette that I love to reach for in the fall time for these two and that, and then I like to deepen it up with a bit of that. Blend it out with Balm Fresco and maybe use Vermeer as a shimmer in the inner corner. That's sort of what I do with this palette. So it has a very specific use for me, and it has taught me that berry tones can be a neutral on me. So that's why I still like this palette and why I keep it around. However, this palette isn't my favorite like it was for everybody else, because my makeup tastes just lie in a slightly different category, as you'll see in a minute. So yeah, let me just swatch Venetian Red and Red Ochre for you, because those are my two favorites. You do see, however, a pattern here for perhaps. I tend to prefer their mattes over their shimmers. Is it a trend? I don't know. But yeah, those two make for a really stunning, like, berry smoky eye. And then I just either like to lay down like a black liner, or I actually have a cream shadow from Chanel that is like a black and red called Rouge Noir. That works really well with this to make it super smoky. But let me just get on to the controversy train, because the Subculture is one of my favorite Anastasia palettes, and I know everybody hated it. I do have to point out that I didn't get this on first launch. I definitely got this a lot later. Like I mentioned, I didn't start buying any other Anastasia palettes until the Norvina. So I believe the Soft Glam, the Subculture, and the Prism had already been released by the time I even looked into buying these. Axis is the worst shade in the palette to work with, but it is my favorite because we all know how much I love teals, and this is the best teal of life. It's just really powdery and difficult to work with. But yeah, that I really like. This is another one of my favorite palettes for the fall time because of this lovely grungy color story. It doesn't have a lot of shimmers, which is why I didn't reach for mine a lot. But what I have found is that these shimmers or these mattes pair really, really nicely with a lot of multi-chromes from indie brands. So that's what I tend to do. I just pull in like one of those like very shifty shades from an indie brand, build up the look with some of these like greens or teals, or I go for mustard yellows or the burgundies, because very often these are the kind of shifts that you find in like those really deep jewel tone multi-chromes. And that's what I go for. So those are those shades, and I really do enjoy my Subculture. And then together with the Subculture, we sort of got the Prism. They released this quite straight after that as the companion palette. That's how this was promoted. I bought it because of Dimension and Throne. This really stunning, like tealy, deep emerald green. And Dimension is that sort of like lavender icy shimmer that they just do in every palette that I love. You'll see if I swatch a few of these that they're all different, she said. But I do really like these two shades. Like, these are really pretty. And then, of course, you do get that bright neon in here. Osiris is a really nice purple. So this is the kind of palette that I don't really use to create looks with, but I kind of pull in these shades when I feel I need them. Another palette that I think not everybody loved, because I've seen a lot of people decluttering the Riviera in recent times. But like I mentioned, I didn't pick up the Alyssa Edwards because I thought it was too similar to this. Are these the best bright mattes ever, and is it as bright as it could have been? No, but again, remember, I'm fair-skinned, I have this cool to neutral undertone, and these shades work really well on me. I really love Seaside, and I love Mediterranean, like these like bluey shades, and these shimmers, let me see if I have Arm left, these are really, really stunning. So these two are just, yeah, these are just stunning, and those are the kind of shades that I really like to use on the lower lash line, all over the lid. And then, of course, you can do something super bright with the pink and the purple if you want to. But for instance, this corally shade works like a neutral if you put it with something like the peach or this very light peachy shade. So for me, this is a palette that's very versatile because you get the colors you would like, but you also get plenty of neutrals to tone it down. I actually did a palette bingo with this, and I pulled out all the boring shades, but it made for a very pretty look. And I actually ended up, like, Seaside is one of my all-time favorite eyeshadows. I wish they did that as a single. So yeah, that's the Riviera, and again, difference of opinion. And then the Jackie Aina, like the Carli Bybel, I originally passed up on this. Mainly because I'm not Jackie Aina, skin tone wise, not by a long shot. So I thought, like the Soft Glam, that this was going to be much too dark. While I appreciate the spirit of this palette and making sure there is a really good palette out there for deeper skin tones, which was the aim she had with the creation of this palette, I wasn't sure it was going to work for me, and that's why I held off. Then I found it on a deal, I bought it, and I was like, wow, this may quality-wise be the best Anastasia palette that has ever launched. In terms of quality, there isn't a single dud. Everything is super well balanced. You can just tell There is so much intention behind every shade that is in here. Sponsored, everybody loves, but I also really like the purple that's in here, this Shookington. This should have been in the Norvina, and also Big Wig. Like, those two shades should have just been in the Norvina palette, I'm telling you. Because ABH can do a good purple, but they just should do them more often. Sure, there are some shades in here that, for me and my pale skin, something like Edges and Wigglies, even though I appreciate them, I don't like them that much, but the pinks with the purples make for such a fun, like, spring look. You get some really good browns. This taupe shade, we haven't discussed my love for taupe yet in this video, but this is also really stunning. And while darker, and therefore not my favorite, like, everyday go-to palette for sure, but this, again, like the Prism, has a couple of really good shades that I just want to keep this palette around for until oblivion, because it has so many stunning things going on. And with this, unlike some of the other Anastasia palettes, I like how this is sort of like a quad. And then over here, you've got like 6 shades that perfectly go together. And then if you do take these two and these two, those also really perfectly go together. So I feel there's also like curated color stories within the palette, which is what I was meaning when I was saying that I felt there's a lot of intention behind the shades you get in here. So yeah, those would be all of my Anastasia palettes. I just quickly wanted to come on here and rave about some eyeshadow, because that's why I like making these videos. We all know how much I love eyeshadow, and I just wanted to create a video series where I talk about some of my favorite palettes, where I have collected a few over time precisely because I love them so much. But yeah, this is what you get when you swatch some Anastasia shadows. They are just really lovely shades. So yeah, thank you very much for watching today's video. Share the eyeshadow palette love in the comments down below if you want to. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 3 new videos a week, and I've got declutters coming your way starting Thursday. So I hope you stay tuned for that. I've got lots of other stuff coming too. I've got another fashion video planned out for next week too. So I hope you'd like to stay tuned, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!